Hello! In this tutorial, I am going to give you a brief introduction to secondary sources. So what are secondary sources? To begin with, they are not the law. Nobody is bound to follow a secondary source. But what a secondary source is an explanation or an analysis of the law. It will give you a good overview of what the law is and provide you with a good foundation for researching an area of law. And in some cases, especially when there is no primary authority for your topic, a secondary source can be persuasive. So if a secondary source is not the law, why would you use it? Well, to begin with, it is a great starting place, especially if you are new to an area of law, because as I mentioned in the last slide, it provides a great background overview, explanation, and analysis of the law. So it's going to give you a firm foundation on which to start your research. It's going to help you generate additional search terms, leading you maybe to particular terms of art, and it's going to help you locate primary authority because in most secondary sources, they will give you footnotes to statutes and cases that back up the assertions that are made within that secondary source. Also, if there is no primary authority, you may rely on a secondary source as a persuasive argument. And then finally, you may want to use secondary sources to stay current in an area of law. And there are a lot of types of secondary sources. You have legal dictionaries, which, as a regular dictionary does, it provides definitions of different legal terms. There are legal encyclopedias, which are really great for getting a general overview of an area of law. There are legal periodicals, which usually discuss particular issues of law in a lot of detail, especially newer issues of law, or they may discuss a particular case in great detail. There are legal treatises, which are books on specific legal topics, such as constitutional law, evidence, criminal law, etc. There are practice guides and form books, which are books that are focused on practicing an area of law. So it's going to talk a lot about the ins and outs of practicing a particular area of law, and a lot about the procedure of practicing that area of law. And then form books, obviously, they give you sample forms, such as complaints and answers and interrogatories and things like that. There are the American Law Reports, which are in-depth articles on very narrow topics. You have the restatements, which are distillations of common law. And then you also have continuing legal education materials, blogs, and legal news. And those are really good for staying current in a particular area of law. And please check out our other tutorials, which will discuss some of these secondary sources in more detail. Now that you know a little bit more about what secondary sources are, I want to show you how to find those in Westlaw and Lexis and some other databases. So in Westlaw, if you go to your Content Types tab, you will find a link to secondary sources. If you click on that link, you will be taken to a page that gives you the various types of secondary sources. So you can find those American Law Reports, you can find the encyclopedias, you can find law reviews and journals, legal newspapers and newsletters, the restatements, text and treatises, etc. You will also find a link under your tools and resources to Black's Law Dictionary. And then once you click into any of these types of secondary sources, you will get a list of the various titles within that type. Also note that the search bar is dynamic, so when you click on anything within Westlaw, you are now just searching that content rather than everything that is on Westlaw. And then going back to that secondary sources page, in addition to narrowing by type, you could also choose to search by jurisdiction. So if you were researching Florida law, maybe you want to look at the secondary sources for Florida specifically. You can also narrow by topic, as well as publication series. So you have several options to narrow your secondary sources before you begin searching, and doing some narrowing in the beginning is always a good idea. And then going back to the Westlaw homepage, um, instead of clicking on secondary sources under your contents type, you could also choose your jurisdiction. So let's say we're interested in Florida, and then from your jurisdictions page, go down and choose secondary sources. And so that's another way of getting into your secondary sources through Westlaw. Moving into Lexis, it's kind of the same concept as it was with Westlaw. So if you look under your content type tab, you can choose secondary materials. And they just break theirs up a little bit differently. So at the top, they have their secondary sources that are national in scope. So you could choose that. But there's also American law reports here, as well as your American jurisprudence legal encyclopedia. You could choose to look at all your federal secondary materials by clicking on federal. You could choose what kind of content type you want for your secondary sources. So do you want treatises, guides, and jurisprudence? Do you want your restatements? Do you want your law reviews and journals? You could choose which state you wanted to look at secondary materials for. You could choose publisher, or you could choose by practice area. If you choose by a content type, such as treatises, it will then ask you to narrow even further, though. Do you want to search national treatises, federal treatises, or by state, or by a particular practice area? Or you could run a search and now you are just searching the treatises, guides, and jurisprudence rather than everything on Lexis. If you narrow further by jurisdiction, you will then get a list of the specific titles that are available within Lexis. And you can search all of those sources, or you can use the button to select sources to search, and then you can just check off a few that seem particularly relevant to your research issue. And then going back to our homepage, just like in Westlaw, you could choose your jurisdiction first, and then choose to search secondary sources. So you can search the treatises, guides, and jurisprudence, or you can search the law reviews and journals. We're going to look at the treatises. And then it has them broken down by topic. So again, you can just find the title you want to search, or you can search specific titles. And then again, this search bar is dynamic. So by narrowing, I'm now just searching for the treatises, guides, and jurisprudence rather than everything in Lexis. In addition to the secondary sources on Westlaw and Lexis, you can search the library's catalog for items in print as well as journals and articles. So please watch our video on the introduction to the library's website and catalog to learn more about doing that. But we also have additional databases, which you can find under the databases A to Z link on the library's website. And so these are a lot of interdisciplinary databases, such as EBSCO or ProQuest, where you can search for articles on a variety of topics, including social sciences and things like that. You're also going to notice some quick links over on the right-hand side, particularly Hein Online. Hein Online is your best bet for law reviews and law review articles. So I highly recommend using Hein Online if you are looking for law review articles. And that is it for secondary sources. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. You can email us, call us, or stop by and visit us in the Larkin room.